Hello, friends, and welcome back to Sunshine Strategies Radio, where local news meets practical hope. I'm your host, Jen McMillan, founder of Sunshine Strategies, civic advocate, and neighbor right here in Central Illinois. This podcast is designed to keep you informed, grounded, and connected to the place we call home. Because strong communities don't just happen by accident, they're cultivated by informed neighbors who care. So let's get into this week's episode. Now, this week I've been doing a lot of thinking about what makes a business American in this day and age. Is it the flag on the label, the location on the headquarters, the accent of the CEO? What about the zip code of the factory? 50 years ago, the answer felt really easy. If it was built here, owned here, and employed your neighbors, it was American. Full stop. But now the world is a tangled electrical grid of supply chains. A company can be headquartered in Illinois, manufactured in Mexico, coded in India, financed in New York, and then owned by shareholders scattered across the planet. The smartphone in your pocket is a United Nations of minerals, microchips, and mathematics. So let's start peeling this back a little carefully. Legally speaking, a company is American if it's an incorporated business under US law. That means it exists because of our legal system and its ability to exist. It gets the protection of US courts, it gets benefits from US infrastructure, and it depends on US consumers. But incorporation is paperwork. Paperwork doesn't tell you where the loyalty lies. Some people argue an American business is one that manufactures here. That has power. Manufacturing creates local jobs, local taxes, local stability. When a factory is humming, the diners are filled up, the little league teams get sponsors, and schools feel the ripples of those effects. But even that definition gets slippery. What if the materials are imported? What if the profits flow to investors overseas? What if the company manufactures here but avoids paying meaningful taxes here? That's where it starts to get interesting. Because maybe what makes a business American isn't just geography. Maybe it's a behavior. An American business, at its best, participates in the American experiment. It believes in the idea that private enterprise and public good aren't enemies. It plays by the rules, it pays its taxes, it invests in its workers. It understands that roads, schools, courts, clean water, and a stable democracy are not optional add ons. They're the operating system. The founders of our country were suspicious of concentrated power for good reason. They had just broken away from a corporation with an army, the British East India Company. They understood that when commerce becomes untethered from civic responsibility, democracy gets a little shaky. So historically, the American idea of business wasn't profit at any cost. It was profit within a constitutional framework. Markets? Yes. Monopolies? No. Innovation? Yes. Exploitation, especially of workers? No. Now, fast forward to 2026. Capital moves at the speed of light. A hedge fund in Connecticut can buy land in Macon County before lunch. Algorithms can trade shares of a local employer without ever knowing what that employer makes. Ownership is abstracted, distance is normalized. And here is the quiet tension. If ownership is global, but impact is local, who carries the responsibility? A business that simply extracts wealth from a town without reinvesting in that town may be legally American, but is it meaningfully American? On the other hand, a company started by immigrants, hiring locally, building housing, strengthening a community, that feels deeply American, even if its supply chain is global. Maybe American is less about borders and more about participation in civic life, participation in local growth, participation in shared prosperity. In the American tradition, business isn't just about wealth creation, or at least I hope so. It's about self governance. Alexis de Tocqueville noticed in the 80s that Americans formed associations constantly for commerce, for causes, for community improvement. Business was a part of the civic fabric. When businesses sponsor the high school robotics team, or they fund park renovations, providing stable jobs with dignity, they become woven into the democratic ecosystem. They become stakeholders, not just sellers. Now, none of this means globalization is evil or that supply chains should collapse back into the 90s. That ship has sailed. And somebody please tell the current administration that. The world is interdependent, and interdependence is not weakness, but reality. But there's a difference between interdependence and attachment. An American business, in the healthiest sense, understands that it operates inside a republic. That might look like transparent governance, fair wages, investing in local communities where we all live, respecting environmental standards, supporting democratic stability instead of undermining it. You notice something? None of that requires a flag pin, but it does require stewardship. There's a deeper philosophical trend here. The United States was built on the idea that power must be checked and balanced, and that includes economic power. Businesses thrive when consumers trust them. Consumers trust them when they behave responsibly. So maybe the better question isn't, is this business American? Maybe it should be, is this business contributing to the American project? Because the American project isn't a place, it is an ongoing argument about liberty, opportunity, and responsibility. A business becomes American not just by filing some paperwork, but by participating in that argument in good faith, by building rather than hollowing out, by rooting rather than extracting, by recognizing that profit and patriotism don't have to be adversaries. But patriotism without responsibility is just branding. So, in this globalized world, identity gets blurry, but principles shouldn't. An American business in this century is one that understands this simple truth. It rises with the health of the communities it touches. When Main Street thrives, the balance sheet eventually does too. And that, more than a label, more than a supply chain map, might be the most American idea of all. All right, and now for your Sunshine Strategies radio episode of the week. Rooted in the vibrant communities of Logan, Christian, Macon, Piatt, DeWitt, and McLean counties. So let's start off with some genuinely uplifting news. Local early childhood education advocates in West Central Illinois just received a boost. Several groups were awarded $12,500 in planning grants from Birth to Five Illinois to support early learning and childcare initiatives. What's beautiful about this isn't just the dollars, it's the intentional energy behind them. Caregivers, educators, and community partners are being funded to work together to expand nurturing spaces for families right here in our region. It's a reminder that investing in our youngest neighbors plants seeds for generational success. And this week on Civic Simplified, the Illinois budget and what it means for our families. You might have heard there's a big conversation happening right now in Springfield about how we spend our money. The governor just proposed a 56 billion state budget for fiscal year 27. Now that has a lot of zeros and a lot of implications. So Let's look at the things that every Central Illinois family should know about. So, first, we have to keep our schools funded well. And this budget includes a huge chunk for education, but unions and teachers are saying it still isn't enough to meet past commitments, especially in our rural and urban districts alike. Dealing with our federal funding uncertainty has become really hard. Some federal support that districts have relied on for years is being threatened or delayed, and that pressure trickles down into classrooms, transportation, and services. The governor, when he did his address today, emphasized that we're stretching a tight set of resources. The proposal makes only modest increases to most programs outside of mandated areas, which mean tough choices are going to be looming in the months ahead. So, our schools could see more stable funding, which helps classroom programs, counselors, special services, and the daily experiences for our kids. Transportation and safety, like buses and getting kids to school, is on the state's radar because rising costs and driver shortages hit rural districts especially hard. And if the legislature listens to educators calling for full funding, we might see meaningful changes that bring Illinois closer to the long promised goal of adequately funding all schools by 2027, something that would matter in every one of our communities. The bottom line for this year's budget, it isn't just abstract. It comes down to whether every child in Central Illinois gets the kind of education and opportunities we want for our own families. Now, turning to a community spotlight, in the spirit of connection and collaboration, let's shine a light on something that quietly knits our region together. And you may have noticed them. It's the show bus, a rural public transit service operating in parts of DeWitt, Logan, Macon, and McLean counties. It might not make the evening headlines, but show bus is vital. It provides a fixed route and demand response services that help folks, especially our older friends, workers without access to cars, and families, stay connected to work, doctors, groceries, and community events. Now, why is that important? In areas where transit options are limited, having reliable rides is more than a convenience. It's essential for economic opportunity, health, and inclusion. When neighbors can get where they need to go, we all benefit. So, this week, thank a neighbor who drives someone to an appointment and celebrate organizations that keep our communities mobile and connected. And I can't leave you without a few small things that you and your family can do this week that you can flex your civic muscles. So, first, I would encourage you to check in with your local school boards, see what issues they're discussing, and show up and weigh in yourself. Engagement starts small but matters really big. Learn more about our local childcare and preschool resources being developed by the Birth to Five Illinois programs. And if the show bus is new to you, go out and see if you're eligible and if it reaches your community. You might know of somebody or you yourself could benefit from it. And as always, bring up these issues at your dinner table and talk to your kids about the budget. See what they've heard from their teachers at school. But whatever you decide to do this week for your civic engagement, keep shining a light on issues that matter, from classroom budgets to community buses, because engaged families in Central Illinois shape the civic landscape every day. I'll catch you next time on Sunshine Strategies.